Hello Horror Hounds. In the build-up towards Universal releasing its new Mummy picture at the end of the week and kickstarting its new Dark Universe, I wanted to have a look through Mummy movies gone by, leading up chronologically to the new movie at the end of the week. So we're starting at the beginning with Universal's classic The Mummy from 1932, starring Boris Karloff, in a feature that I've inevitably decided to call Show Me the Mummy. Having very recently rewatched the film and then read up a little bit about it, I think it's fair to say I enjoy The Mummy more on an intellectual level than as a punter watching the film. Whilst there's lots to enjoy about the film, I think it's fair to say that it kind of blows its greatest scene within the first 10 minutes of the movie and then never really achieves those heights again. But what an opening. The subtlety of the opening of this movie is really impressive. First we're introduced to the exoticism, almost alienness of the Egyptian setting and the archaeological dig, and then three quick thumbnail sketches of the three players involved, which instantly makes us as the viewer aware that inevitably the scroll is going to get read from, and we know exactly who's going to read from the scroll, and we know that the mummy laying in the back of an awful lot of these shots in his sarcophagus is going to wake up. And the restraint shown in that awakening is almost unbelievable, especially in this day of whiz bang, put absolutely everything on the screen. To know that the Jack Pierce's amazing mummy makeup took about 8 hours to apply, and the camera only lingers on it 2-3 times for us to sort of drink in how absolutely gorgeous it is. And rather than drench the screen in the mummy, it's just little touches. Karloff's eyes barely opening, his hands across his chest like this, breaking the bonds and slowly moving down his chest. Then mostly reaction from the archaeologist at the table. We just see the hand come in to grab the scroll, then it's reaction, reaction, reaction as the mummy leaves and the camera just pans across to give us sight of a couple of trailing bandages leaving the room. And whilst we never see Karloff again in full mummy regalia, he returns as the film jumps forward about 10 years as a character called Ardeth Bey, the same character, the resurrected Imhotep, now trying to steer these colonial plunderers of Egyptian tombs, these foreign archaeologists, trying to steer them towards the tomb that he once unearthed. He is playing a man that's 4,000 years old. He plays a man that's intellectual rather than physical. Minimalist movements, so few, no gestures, all eyes, and all the hypnotic close-ups of his face where the eyes, and sometimes they highlight the eyes to give him that eerie sort of sense of mesmerism. And the female lead, Zita Johann, playing opposite him, she makes for an absolutely fascinating female lead. Her look is so intriguing. It's a really, for me, there's a really heady mixture in her performance of headstrong and vulnerable, of a character in peril, but also a character who can be dangerous. And she's playing dual roles as the reincarnation of Ankh-Sunamun, as well as her modern day character, Helen Grosvenor, I think. She slides between the two as sometimes perhaps Ankh-Sunamun, or the memory, or the genetic memory of Ankh-Sunamun starts to float towards the surface whenever she sees Ardeth Bey, and whenever the two of them are on screen together, it's crackling. I have to be honest though and say that for a modern viewer, the film could be considered very slow and very ponderous. I know some people wallow in that and that old style filmmaking. Other people are going to find it extremely tedious. After the blistering opening with the tomb and then a really intriguing looking party scene with lots going on and lots of people and the Cairo surroundings, for me, it loses its way a little and just devolves into that old standby, a succession of conversations in drawing rooms without any literary antecedent, without a novel or a play to base this script on. There's only, towards the start, a general riffing on the interest that had spread across the world about Egyptology and the opening of Tutankhamun's tomb from 1922, and more of the lurid interest and speculation about the curse associated with opening that tomb that just riffles through it. And the beats and the characters and the way the plot progresses is beholden an awful lot to the beats and the progression of Dracula. It's just that Dracula managed, I think, with such an expressive, really strange performance from Bela Lugosi that just draws you in, manages to hold my interest more than the much more restrained, much more self-contained. Much as I adore his performance, the much more self-contained Boris Karloff doesn't jump from the screen and grab my interest in a story that is kind of a retread of the Dracula story, that in and of itself, because it's based on a stage play, suffers from lots of conversations in drawing rooms. So you should be getting the impression now that I believe the film to actually be quite top heavy. A really condensed, excellent start, and then the film sort of meanders and loses its way until we get to the climax where kind of not much really happens. And it's such a shame because the deleted scenes from this movie would have occurred at the end, and I feel would have counterbalanced the start of the movie. What survives of those deleted scenes are the actual flashback scenes we get back to Imhotep when he was a man and the punishment placed upon him. Ardith Bey has got Helen now and uses his remote viewing pool to show her his past, their past, her previous reincarnation. And in a really nice touch, the flashbacks are filmed like silent cinema. The cameras are overcranked so the movements quicker like we used to in silent cinema. The gestures are exaggerated, even the eyeliner on Boris to make him look like a star of the silent screen. It's a beautiful touch for a historical flashback in a 1930s piece of cinema to reference even earlier cinema. Imhotep's punishment in the flashback scene, watching him get bandaged up alive with the wrappings covering his mouth, and then till it's only his eyes, and then the eyes go over, is an incredibly striking scene. And then he's buried alive, and then the slaves that bury him are killed. This is a pre-code movie, so you see spears run through slaves. That is all that survives of the full deleted flashbacks, and as striking as that is, it just makes me wish that the ending of the movie as conceived was still there and intact. What we were to have had would have been Ardith Bey showing Helen back through time, back through her reincarnations, regressing through time. We would have seen her in medieval France as a princess, in Saxon England, about to be overrun by Vikings and taking her own life, back further in time as a Christian in ancient Rome, being thrown to the lions, and then further back still to her original incarnation as Ankh-Sunamun. And at that point we would have seen her death and Imhotep's transgressions and attempts to revive her, and his punishment, which turned him into the mummy from the start of the film. It would have been a final gut punch right at the end of the movie, a sort of tsunami of context and understanding and motivation for this 4,000-year-old character of Ardith Bey, who says, "My love has lasted longer than the temples of our gods. No man has ever suffered as I did for you." Another YouTube user, I will link to it down below, has taken stills remaining from those flashbacks and strung it together in a kind of slideshow recreation of what the deleted scenes might have looked like and might have shown us. It's well worth your time checking out. What I would like to say though is this element from The Mummy, whilst I've been knocking the script a fair bit, this element of the script, the idea of the reincarnated lover found again after centuries or thousands of years by our timeless creature, is a story element that has been looted, like the tombs of the pharaohs, by countless other films over the decades, and this I feel is The Mummy's final and lasting contribution to the movies that have come after it. Billed therefore as a bit of a romance, a bit of a horror romance, but is Imhotep really a romantic figure, or is he something a lot more sinister? The sexual politics in this film I find absolutely fascinating. Imhotep's actions, and in the guise of Ardith Bey, to my mind, are more akin to that of an obsessive stalker than a timeless romantic love that endures the centuries. He's always waiting as Ardith Bey. He's always watching, even remotely through his pool. He's watching from a distance. He's influencing from a distance. His presence is there constantly and always, even when he's not physically there. He's an obsessive, surely, rather than a romantic lover. And his modern day counterpart, his love rival in this, Frank, the young archaeologist, has a sort of assumed appropriation of the character of Helen, and he's not much better. He treats her weirdly as an extension of the fascination he developed whilst breaching Ankh-Sunamun's tomb. I'm going to read you his dialogue as he's declaring his love for Helen because she reminds him of the mummified corpse of Ankh-Sunamun. The 14 steps down and the unbroken seals were thrilling, but when we came to handle all her clothes and her jewels and her toilet things, you know they buried everything with them as they used in life. Well, when we came to unwrap the girl herself, after we'd worked among her things, I felt as if I'd known her, but when we got the wrappings off and I saw her face, you'll think me silly, but I sort of fell in love with her. That's really creepy, isn't it? Let alone the sort of necrophiliac undertones, the idea of appropriation, rifling through her things, unwrapping her, unclothing her, and then owning her, and objects to be taken and displayed in the British Museum, and then by extension Helen herself is the next link in the chain of his fascination. The object, Helen, ultimately helps herself. Well, it's Ankh-Sunamun, it's fascinating. By the end, the men are ineffectual. Frank does really practically nothing to help at the end the woman that he proclaims to love. Imhotep, it turns out, means to be with her by mummifying her, killing her, then resurrecting her so that they can be together in that state. So this timeless love of his takes a really nasty turn at the end that she understandably rejects. Helen's central crisis is one of identity. She finds herself battling with her urges and that of a previous persona, the ancient princess Ankh-Sunamun. And whilst throughout the movie Ankh-Sunamun is barely a character, but more a prize to be won or possessed either by the past, Ardith Bey, or the present, Frank, in the form of those two suitors, she finally decides her own fate. She takes over Helen Grosvenor. She rejects Imhotep and she pleads with Isis for intervention, which brings about the end of the film. So whilst I'm more intrigued by the themes present in the film rather than perhaps mechanically how they play out, my opinion is one of a group of treasures scattered throughout this newly opened tomb. So I'd like to bring you, as I normally do, a couple of alternate viewers' viewpoints I've taken from the Internet Movie Database user reviews. The first one is from a reviewer called Connor Drake, who says the film has one problem, but it's a big one. It's boring. He uses a lot of O's and it's in capitals. Okay, let's be fair. It starts off good when we first see the mummy waken. The guy who goes insane is very well done, but after the first scene the movie starts to drag a lot. And I know it's not just the time period because I love the classic chillers. Dracula and Frankenstein are two of my favourite films, but this, it just doesn't hold up. There's a redeeming factor, however. Karloff. What a great performance he gives here. Much better than Frankenstein's monster. If you're a fan of Boris Karloff, definitely don't miss this one. But other than that, I wouldn't recommend it. If you just want the story, Hammer did a great remake of this. Even the 1999 version will at least hold your attention. Other than fans of Karloff or chillers, give this one a miss. And we'll give the last word, as we usually do, to channel favourite Jacob John Taylor 1, who calls this a horror classic. This a great movie. 7.2 is underrating it. This a true classic. This is scary than The Shining, 1980. This movie has a great storyline. It also has great acting. It also has great special effects. The remake from 1999 is a little better. The Mummy Returns is also better. The Mummy Tomb of the Dragon Emperor is also better. But still, this is a great movie. This is one of the scariest movies from the 30s. It is one of the scariest movies made before 1999. Boris Karloff was a great actor. This movie is a must-see. It is a horror movie classic. Zita Johann was a great actress. All the Mummy movies are must-sees. See this movie. It is a great horror film.